semester's Department of English, Rhetoric and Writing Reading Series. And I'd like to thank the department, as well as the Georgia Poetry Circuit and the Georgia Council for the Arts for supporting this reading. I'm very pleased to introduce to you tonight Allison Joseph. Born in London to parents of Caribbean heritage, Allison Joseph grew up in Toronto and the Bronx. A graduate of Kenyon College and Indiana University, she currently teaches at Southern Illinois University, where she also edits the nationally known journal Crab Orchard Review. She's published 4 books of poetry, including What Keeps Us Here, which won Ampersand Press's Women Poet Series Prize, as well as the John C. Zacharias First Book Prize, and her most recent collection, Imitation of Life. Allison Joseph's work is best described in the language of the poems themselves. In La Marqueta, the market, she writes, "Such plenty in one place is better than any carnival or circus, more real." Hers is indeed a poetry of plenty and of reality. Perhaps no other poet of her generation has so deeply explored the experience of childhood and adolescence, and many of her poems examine how the sensually perceived world connects to one's identity, which is formed in those early years. We see this in Salt, as the speaker's meditation on her craving for salt brings her back to her childhood trip to her parents' home country of Jamaica, where she drank in that salty sea, knowing it belonged far within, where nothing else could reach. Allison Joseph's poems are often stories which transport us more deeply into reality, the reality particularly of growing up female and black in a society which too often attempts to limit by defining along stereotypical lines. In telling us her life, for the reader does feel these works are driven by autobiographical truth. She forces us to reconsider our own, and not just in simple ways, as when forced to view photos of herself in the hideous fashions of the past, she asks us to remember how we also dressed in plaid so busy they brought on vertigo. More significantly, the poems ask us to remember that how we speak to and of each other says so much about who we ourselves are. "Let us simply speak to one another," Joseph writes, in On Being Told I Don't Speak Like a Black Person. "Listen and prize the inflections, never assuming how any person will sound, until his mouth opens, until her mouth opens, greetings welcome in any language." Calling on us to respect the mystery, which is the uniqueness of each individual life, these poems demand of us our most humane, asking that we remember how humanity, like the forgiveness she writes of, starts small, with one meal, one bowl, one satiating, salty mouthful. It also starts with one word, with one poem, with one poet. Please welcome Allison Joseph.
Wasn't that the most eloquent introduction you have ever heard? Please give Dr. Meek a hand. I'm going to have to put you on retainer. You know this. And you also helped me decide what poems I'm going to read, because you quoted from so many of them, I can figure out what to read. I will do that. Thanks for the plan. First of all, let me say that this has to be one of the best kept secrets, this college here in higher education, that I have ever seen. What a gorgeous campus, even on a horribly rainy and drizzly day like today. What a gift. I'll start with La Marqueta. La Marqueta. Remember the market beneath the L, the wooden stalls that shook each time a train rumbled overhead. Such plenty in one place, dozens and dozens of narrow booths jammed together, sawdust strewn all over the dirty floors, old women scarfed, wrapped, arms loaded with bags of bargains, shrieking at the butchers in shrill Spanish or bitter English, taunting those men in their bloodied white coats, watching, sharp-eyed, for fingers on the scales. Young, fascinated, I watched them too. Loud, proud men working their stalls, whistling aloud, hoisting sharpened cleavers and knives to strip and slice and hack at massive slabs of beef or pork, paring away fat, bone, gristle. They'd claim to pick the best fish, especially for you, top trout or red snapper, pinkest salmon, greatest calamari and shrimp this side of Italy, laid out on wide beds of crushed and shattered ice. My family came on weekends to buy what we couldn't find elsewhere. Fleshy round breadfruit big as cannonballs, mounds of succulent mangoes ripening, each one full of juicy yellow pulp. Bulla cake, high, dense, brown, a Caribbean cross between a cookie and a biscuit, moist and sweet from dark brown sugar. We admired hefty wedges of provolone or Gouda, picked weighty yams, gnarled ginger roots thick as twisted fingers, bought sacks of huge green callaloo leaves, of dried codfish coated white with salt. La Marqueta was better than any carnival or circus, more real, piñatas swinging from the rafters of one booth, fried fish sizzling in another, long, lovely bananas here, larger than anywhere in the city, unblemished in smooth yellow skins, cool to my wandering fingers, firm to my faithful touch. We had a wonderful time at dinner talking about language, and I was talking a little bit about this poem. My parents came from the Caribbean and made their way through several countries to the United States. So they spoke with Caribbean accents, and they had a lot of British words in their vocabularies because they'd spent a good deal of time there. So growing up, I was always trying to figure out what my parents were saying to me. And I realized when I wrote this poem, this is a universal. No matter how old you are always trying to figure out what it is your parents are saying to you. Translating my parents. When my father would growl, "Wash the wares now," I always thought he'd said W-E-D-S. Learned to move to the sink quickly, in terror, knew his order meant wash the dishes right away and don't use too much soap. And when mother asked me to put serviettes on the table, I knew she meant set the table, use napkins, the paper kind. What sort of English was this that they spoke so surely, an odd lingo of strange terms like brawly and dustbin for umbrella and trash can, flannel instead of washcloth, plimsolls instead of sneakers? Baffled by their love of fish and chips, crisps and crumpets, I wondered why they drank tea instead of coffee, why my father downed Guinness instead of Miller High Life, making me sip that dark, bitter stout, laughing as I grimaced, wrinkling my 8-year-old nose. I couldn't imagine them living in any other country but this one, in any other house but this one, couldn't imagine the house of my birth. 289 Whiteman Road, London Borough of Haringey. The only borough I knew was the Bronx. And there, an elevator was an elevator, not a lift. A cookie was a cookie, not a biscuit. And no one dared call sausage and potatoes bangers and mash. I learned to translate their dialect into an English I could recognize. So when my father nagged, "Write a Z and write it properly," I knew he truly meant, write a Z, as in zipper, as in zero, and write it plainly so I can read it. This is a poem called What We Once Wore. It's about that dizzying sensation you get when you open up a photo album from, say, 10 or 15 years ago and realize that you thought you looked good back then, but you really didn't. What we once wore. Please, put that photo album away. I don't want to remember that I once wore neon green short shorts, tube socks past my knees, and t-shirts with contrasting piping on plunging scoop necks. I thought I looked cute in thick-soled plush suede sneakers, also green, with laces so yellow it hurts, it actually hurts to remember them. Once I favored tube tops, ribbed garments so tight, so shot through with elastics they left marks on my flat chest, or so loose they constantly slipped down flimsy fabric around my navel. Floral print halter tops with matching maxi skirts, chunky high-heeled sandals, cork-bottomed, I wore them all, in patterns and colors too scary to confess. But don't laugh. I know what's at the back of your closets. Forest green knickers you wore one St. Patrick's Day for a puny festive look. Urban cowboy shirts you thought both you and John Travolta looked good in. Polyester tank tops that stretched as your midriff grew, incredible, inevitable. And ladies, I know you have some horrors back there too. Jumpsuits with too many zippers to all stay closed at once. Bathing suits with reflector panels. Torn t-shirts left over from your miscalculated plunge into the aerobics craze. It pains you too to think of how long your collars once were, how shiny your acrylics, how you once dressed in plaid so busy they brought on vertigo, stripes too broad to ignore. I love those pictures as much as they make me burn. This is a poem called Salt. I am a salt addict. I can't stop eating it. I know I should, I know it's bad for me, I know it hurts your blood pressure, but I found the best thing the other day. This little grinder that had the salt already built in, so you can go crank, crank, crank. It seemed even more fun than the regular shaker. And there was always the story of me as a young girl being back in the Caribbean, being so enchanted by the sea. So I put those two things together. Salt. There's a kind of glory in it, I think, though doctors warn of the havoc it can do set loose in the body, able to rocket blood pressure way past danger. But I crave it nonetheless, reaching for the fullest shaker, whitest crystals, pouring it on everything, anything, adding it to the pale trickle of flavor that passes for soup in the cafeteria. Sprinkling it on the tame grains of rice and the tepid, wilting leaves from the market salad bar, not denying its sting over chicken noodle casserole or macaroni and cheese, homey foods too plain to eat without salt, too boring to consider without that familiar burn, that fall of white raining down on warmed-over leftovers. How else could anyone eat dingy washes of boiled broccoli or formerly frozen carrots faded beyond recognition? Vegetables far too blanched to think of without salt savvy tossed on top. And when I say I'll cut down, I'll take the shaker off the table, there's always butter. Molten and balmy in saltiness, always cheese. Its sharp tang of sodium intact, whether you grate it, slice it, melt it. Yes, my thirst is incredible. Lush, wanton, so thick I drink far too many glasses of water per day, that fluid, swelling membranes, cavities. If I could, I'd return to that childhood Jamaica trip. Salty water, bluer than I ever knew water could be, buoying me up, slipping past my lips, into my mouth, beloved taste of home in seas I'd never seen before. Relatives still say I couldn't get enough, Child who didn't want to leave the sea, who drank that water deeply, flooding my mouth with it, loving its prickle on my tongue, knowing it belonged far within where nothing else could reach. Still, the poem ends up being a justification for Cheetos. We were also talking at dinner about language and accents and where you come from and how your voice marks who you are. I'm always told that I don't sound like a black person, whatever that means. So I finally wrote a poem about it. That's my way of coping. No. You don't sound like a black person. Oh, okay. I'll write a poem about that. On being told I don't speak like a black person. Emphasize the hit, you ignorant hoss, was what my mother was told when colonial-minded teachers slapped her open palm with a ruler in that Jamaican schoolroom. Trained in England, they tried to force their pupils to speak like Eliza Doolittle after her transformation, fancying themselves British as Henry Higgins, despite dark, sun-ripened skin. Mother never lost her accent, though, the music of her voice charming everyone, an infectious lilt I can imitate, not duplicate. No one in the States told her to eliminate the accents. So, no one in the States told her to eliminate the accent. My high school friends adoring the way her voice would lift when she called me to the phone. Allison, it's friend Kathy. Why don't you sound like her? They'd ask. I didn't sound like anyone or anything. No grating New Yorker nasality, no fastidious British mannerisms like the ones my father affected when he wanted to sell someone something. And I didn't sound like a black American, college acquaintances observed. Sure, they knew what a black person was supposed to sound like. Was I supposed to sound lazy, dropping syllables here and there, not finishing words but slurring final letters so each sentence joined the next, sliding past the listener? Were certain words off limits, too erudite for someone whose skin came with a natural tan? I asked them what they meant and they stuttered, blushed, said, you know, black English, applying a term from that semester's text. Does everyone in your family speak alike? I'd ask. And they'd say, don't take this personal. Don't take this the wrong way. Now I realize there's nothing more personal than speech, that I don't have to defend how I speak, how any person, black, white, chooses to speak. Let us speak. Let us talk with the sound of our mothers and fathers still reverberating in our minds, wherever our mothers or fathers come from. Arkansas, Belize, Alabama, Brazil, Aruba, Arizona. Let us simply speak to one another, listen and prize the inflections, never assuming how any person will sound until his mouth opens, until her mouth opens. Greetings welcome in any language. When I first started this next poem, I thought of it as an elegy. It's for Michael Jackson. Because the Michael I grew up with is dead. He's been replaced by this space creature, and I want that little boy back with the big afro and the brown skin. Where'd he go? I want him back. And there's this deep sadness in me that that person doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Tito still looks the same, but what the hell happened to Michael? This is called Shake Your Body. This is the Michael I want to remember. Full lips, afro large as life, lithe body slim but not dangerous, mouth imploring us to dance, shout, shake our bodies down to the ground. His face, his own, untouched by surgery. This Michael's no freak show, his dancing not reduced to crotch grabs and pyrotechnics, skin not powdered beyond recognition to a zone neither black nor white, but phantom-like, pallid as talc. This Michael still glittered, still shone, his nose broad across his face, hair untouched by chemicals that would slick his afro to a dead sheen, greasy under stage lights. This Michael was on his way to being a man, a black man, someone whose albums I wouldn't hide, whose voice wouldn't turn into mere vocal tics, tricks, a parody of itself, a joke we're all aware of except for Michael himself, who's left behind our ghettos, our streets, left behind Detroit and Newark, Little Rock and Gary. The Michael I want to remember blamed it on the boogie. It, the energy no one can deny him. Boogie, the irresistible urge to dance. The dance uncomplicated by the dancer, uncompromised as the face he used to possess. Brown, broad, African. Everyone should write a poem about the worst place you've ever lived in. It should be a mandatory assignment in creative writing classes, I believe. This is called Goodbye, Chateau West, Apartments and Townhomes. I actually lived in Chateau West apartments and townhomes. And if you are ever in Little Rock, Arkansas, and you're on Asher Avenue, you will still see the sign for Chateau West apartments and townhomes. It was kind of like a private version of the projects. They gave us a bulletin one time that said, groups larger than 3 may not assemble on the sidewalks due to the rise in gang activity. I'm like, what? I can't stand out in front of my house? Of course it wasn't my house. Thank God it wasn't my house. Goodbye, Chateau West apartments and townhomes. Goodbye, giant roaches that scurried and scuttled into nooks, crannies seemingly far too small for their shellac shiny bodies, impatient antenna. Goodbye, cracks in the ceiling, gaps in the plaster that gushed water when it rained, streams pouring into every bucket and pan, every waste basket dragged into the kitchen to catch the overflow, the dishwater, gray water that flooded the kitchen tile until the linoleum peeled, buckling back from the corners, wrinkled as an aged hand. Goodbye, shaky toilet that ran for 20 minutes after every flush, though we'd all jiggle the handle to make it stop, damning that noisy plumbing, its ceaseless gurgle echoing in our ears like the roar of some particularly nasty sea no one ever wanted to visit. Goodbye, chipped bathroom tile. Goodbye, shower stall that leaked runoff into the living room, dampening the carpet, baseboards, moisture always creeping underfoot, despite rent paid on time, despite the maintenance man's constant efforts, obvious valor. Goodbye, parking spaces strewn with broken glass. Goodbye, potholes in the asphalt that were never filled properly after the gas company came onto the property, dug up the pavement, and left. Goodbye, stolen mail and lost letters. Goodbye to dumpsters full of sodden plastic bags and irretrievably rusted toys, busted bicycles and leaky fast food cartons. Goodbye to 40-ounce bottles of Old English and St. Ides smashed against the curbs, malt liquor remnants of somebody's Saturday night greeting me on Sunday morning. Goodbye to it all. I've turned in the keys, cut off the gas and cable, told the electric company to discontinue their overpriced service, filled out so many change of address cards that my new address keeps repeating its hope inside my head. All will be better on East Grand, all will be shiny, new. The key will fit the front door's lock. The air conditioner won't leak condensation. And the apartment manager will apologize for every nick in the door, every chip in the paint. Well, all wasn't better on East Grand, but I haven't written that poem yet. You move from a series of apartments to apartments, and maybe you finally buy your own house, and then it really starts, because you own the crap then. If it falls apart, it's your own damn fault. Like, John, come quickly. The railing just fell off in the bathroom. Yeah, we bought a house that an elderly woman had lived in for many years, so she had one of those grab bars. And one day I was taking a shower and put my foot on the grab bar, and the grab bar came loose. The house is falling apart on us. I'm going to read a few more poems. These are coming from this book, Soul Train. When my husband and I got married, we were poor graduate students. And we were also non-church-going poor graduate students. So we didn't get married in a church. So we thought, oh, we'll do like people do in the movies. We'll go to the Justice of the Peace. Little did we know at the time we were trying to get married, everybody had already booked all the Justices of the Peace. So someone said, well, the city clerk can marry you. And I said, city clerk? Okay, I'll go see. We went to go see the city clerk, and she said, okay, here's your appointment time. We show up. I put on a dress. He puts on a sweater. His parents are there, my sister. That's it. Our best men showed up late, but they did get the Red Lobster dinner afterward. City clerk's not there. She's taken ill. The assistant city clerk is there. She's maybe 18, 19, maybe 20 tops. Nothing wrong with that. But she can't find a robe. Of course, you know, you have to marry us in a robe. Finally finds one, and her sneakers are sticking out from underneath the bottom. Then, we have to find our vows. Apparently they have pre-printed sets of vows. All you do is write out the name of the previous couple and put your name in. To this day, I still don't know what I agreed to. I'm like, as long as it doesn't say obey, that's okay. And it was funny, on the paper, the whiteout was like 6 or 7 generations thick. But I got to thinking after we'd been married for a while, what kind of wedding I would have wanted. And I decided that I wanted at least my fantasy wedding to be the original Bad Taste wedding. Just really tacky, because I think that would be fun. You know, you see all these magazines, Elegant Bride, Atlanta Bride, this, that, the other bride. I want to see Bad Taste Bride. I think that would be great. So I wrote this poem. That was a long preamble to this poem. The only things you have to know, the references in my poems aren't very high toned, so if you think you hear a reference to a certain Eddie Murphy movie in the first 2 lines, you are correct. And the shaft I am referring to here is not Samuel L. Jackson in the piss poor remake. I'm referring to Richard Roundtree, who will always be Shaft to me. Shaft, yes. You know, the black private did, who's a second machine to all the chicks. Yeah, that's who I'm referring to. This poem's called Wedding Party. I wanted to have a wedding where a band called Sexual Chocolate would play cover versions of Turn the Beat Around and Got to Be Real, tunes So disco, everyone's forsaken them in the oh-so-cynical 90s. I wanted my bridesmaids in orange tulle, groomsmen in light green, their cummerbunds so wide their waists became some thick, enticing region, regal as an alleyway. I wanted folks to glide onto the dance floor, doing quaint, antiquated dances like the funky chicken, Latin hustle, polyester divas doing moves so fine even Shaft himself would have to stop, grin his approval. I wanted finger foods in snack sizes, a wedding cake piled so high in gumdrops and coconut that no one's blood sugar level would be safe. I wanted it crass and big and ugly, bad enough to make relatives shudder whenever they remembered my denim patchwork gown. Platform heels. Instead, I'm here at the city clerk's office, an ordinary woman in an ordinary dress, marrying an ordinary man in ordinary shoes. Still, I know that party is going on somewhere, if only in the strange regions of my mind. Music and costumes by earth, wind, and fire. Catering by Mama and Company. And the MC, of course, is a dapper black man who wishes us love, peace, and soul. Our lives, one everlasting ride on the soul train bound for Boogie Wonderland. Little Stevie's harmonica blowing us one last tune in the key of life. Yes, you can see that my ambition was to be a backup singer. Problem is, I can never remember enough of a song to sing it entirely. So what I do is put lines from songs in poems, and that seems to work out okay. And people are like, oh, you sang! This next poem is another music poem. I seem to be going backwards in this. This is a poem that the occasion of it was before, after we had been married for a while, but I was already in Little Rock, and my husband John, who's also a writer, he was finishing up graduate work back in Indiana, and I was staying with his parents because we didn't have an apartment yet, and all the stuff was still back in Indiana, and they had a spare room, but it was a room in the house that once had been a nursery. It wasn't the house that John had grown up in. So it had like animal print stuff on the wall, you know, that baby wallpaper. So I'm there, I'm without my husband, all I have is my radio from companionship, and boom, I'm 15 years old again. Did he call? Is there a letter for me? And when you're separated from the person that you love, your sentimentality quotient goes way up. The things that you think are corny and trite, when you're with your person, all of a sudden become true, and you're weeping the really bad songs. Or you're horny as hell. And I was spending a lot of time listening to the late night radio program, and if you know black radio programming, late at night is when you get the slow songs. And the DJ sounds like this. So I was listening to a lot of that and feeling really sorry for myself. So I wrote a poem called Slow Jams. And you know what the slow jam is. That's the song they play at the end of the party, hoping that people will hook up and go home together. Practically everything the Isley Brothers did in a certain period. Slow jams. Tonight, I'm just another listener to late night radio soul, hearing song after song of longing, singing along with the choruses, the female backup singers featured on almost every song to give counterpoint to male desires, echoing words like kiss or eyes or baby, a vocabulary of warmth they voice again and again. Tonight, I want pure, unabashed emotion, tight street corner harmonies, love man raps, spoken lusty and slow, high notes soaring from the world's best divas, Chaka Khan, Gladys Knight, and the jammin' Tina Marie, funkiest white girl on the planet. No limits to love when I listen to these songs, nothing held back in the delivery of this break up, make up music, the DJ's declarations spinning out over the airwaves. Roger and Cassandra, Kim and Andre, Leslie and Donnell forever. Nowhere else is need so obvious, ardently revealed in titles like Slow Motion, Honey Love, Quiet Storm. Tonight I'm listening to fill hours without you, moments I can't reach for my man. Loving long distance, I send it far beyond this radio station's range, past miles that mark hours between us. Only music this rich could span those lengths, full as symphonies, sonatas. So I'm not ashamed to sing my own shaky harmony with ballad after ballad, unafraid to linger on long notes with lights low, radio on. It's so sad. There's no real black station where I live now, so I can't do that late night thing. And BET only does a little bit of that. Don't get me started on BET, please. Hey, they laid off their entire news division. What is wrong with these people? Black people got news? Hell, we got rid of Trent Lott. Or maybe Trent got rid of himself. I'm going to read just 3 more poems. This next poem was inspired by the fact that I was noticing that particularly women in my creative writing classes were writing a lot about the phenomenon, the childhood phenomenon of playing with dolls, particularly the dreaded Barbie. And I said to my class once, I said, does anyone know that Barbie had a little sister? And they're like, no, Barbie doesn't have a sister. I said, there's a Skipper. Skipper. Now Barbie got like a whole convention. She got like a whole family. She got a little sister. She got a baby sister. She got, multiple divorces. But I realized after writing this poem that one of the things I was getting out by writing it was my frustration over being a little sister, because I'm a little sister, and you always get the hand-me-downs. And so this is Barbie's little sister. How terrible it would be to be Barbie's little sister, suspended in perpetual pre-adolescence, while Barbie, hair flying behind her in a tousled blonde mane, dashed from adventure to adventure, ready for space travel, or calf roping, or roller disco, in campy, flashy clothes that defied good taste and reason. Stuck with the awful nickname Skipper. Barbie's little sis never got out much. A mere boarder in Barbie's 3-story hot pink dream house. Too young to wear the thousands of outfits stashed in the bedroom closets. Purple beaded Armani evening gowns. Knit sweater dresses by Donna Karan. Specially commissioned tennis togs sewn personally by Oleg Cassini. Skipper had to buy off the rack at Kmart. Condemned to wear floral sunsuits with Peter Pan collars. Unlike her bosomy sister, Skipper had no chest for the boys to ogle, until some bright toy maker gave us Growing Up Skipper. With a twist of her right arm, she grew taller, breasts sprouting where there once were none. A thick rubber band inside her, pushing her chest up and out until the band snapped, and Skipper was stuck at age 15, never the same again. For consolation, she turned to Barbie's best friend, Christy, Barbie's black friend, Christy, who was just figuring out all the fuss about equal rights, and Barbie's best pal, Midge, who was tired of hearing about spats with Ken, knowing he was cheating on America's sweetheart with every new celebrity doll on the market. Together, those three decided they'd had enough of Toyland. So they pooled their cash, swiped Barbie's camper, and tore out of California for Las Vegas, where they bought a little establishment not too far from the gaming houses. A restaurant for all of us without thick manes of hair or upturned noses, without impossibly slender ankles and tiny feet, without perfectly molded breasts. I always love the breasts that you got on the Barbie doll because they feel like these mountains. Ooh, when I grow up, will I have those? This poem is called On Sidewalks, on Street Corners, as Girls. Just who was Miss Mary Mac, all dressed in black, 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 with her stalwart buttons up and down her back, her patient request for 50 cents to see some bedraggled circus elephant jump a fence. As children, we never asked who she was, content instead to clap out her story in pairs, our hands meeting, then parting in quick motion. When we sang, we're going to Kentucky, we're going to the fair to see the señorita with flowers in her hair. We'd shake our little girl hips in time with the melody, but we never stopped to ask what a lovely señorita was doing at a fair. And we possessed no knowledge of where Kentucky was. Didn't even know what one did at a fair. Children who only knew cinder block and cement, corner storefronts, brick high-rises. We sang about Miss Lucy and her prized steamboat, the steamboat destined for heaven and Miss Lucy for hell. Sang rumble to the bottom, rumble to the top. One girl in the midst of the circle, twirling and twirling until she stopped, finger pointed at the next girl who would shake her stuff in front of us. Our chants heard in every schoolyard, every parking lot, everywhere small, dark girls could gather to hear their voices swell in nonsense rhyme, neighborhood chant. Hands and feet would stomp out rhythms inherited from older sisters. Story songs about seeing London, seeing France. Sassy songs about someone's mama doing wrong, acting crazy. No one would dare take away our homemade street corner music. So we'd spend every afternoon after school and every shred of summer daylight riffing, scatting, improvising, unafraid to tell each other, shake it to the east, shake it to the west, shake it to the one you love the best. Now, the lines in this poem about sassy songs about someone's mama doing wrong come from a particular schoolyard chant that I didn't put in the poem, but I will recite for you now. Went a little like this. Your mama don't wear no drawers, ding dong. I saw when she took them off, she threw them in the sky. Superman refused to fly. Those were my first poems, man. I'm going to end with a poem. I mean, I love being out and doing readings and meeting people and eating their good food. It's fabulous, but I miss my husband so very much. And this is a poem about him and for him. And we were talking a little bit about the fabulous island of Jamaica. And if you're not familiar with Bob Marley, I know most of you probably are. But he's a figure in this next poem. And the Wailers were his group. So Bunny and Peter Tosh were part of the Wailers. The impetus for the poem was that I believe in consumer conspiracies, and I thought for a long time that CDs were merely a conspiracy of the record industry to get us to buy all the things that we bought on cassette already again, all over again. And now the same thing is happening with DVDs. All the films you had on VHS, ooh, let me get that. It's got extra features. It's crazy. I'm like, I didn't like this movie in the first place. Why am I buying it again? Because it's got extra features. It's got outtakes. It's got the shooting script. The shooting script is bad. It's crazy. They're going to come up with something else and, make us buy our own names back or something. But I noticed when we finally did give in and we finally bought CDs, the first CDs that my husband bought were of Bob Marley. And I thought, isn't this interesting? I'm the one with the Caribbean background, yet he is buying Exodus. This is called My Husband Plays Me Marley. My husband plays me Marley more than any white man born and bred in Arkansas should. So much that I think any day now he will wake with a head full of dreads, big spliff between his lips like Marley's on the album covers. In this age of CDs, he actually owns the albums, even the one where the cover tells you how to clean a herb. Though I'm the one with the mother from Jamaica, he's the one leading me through get up, stand up, and Rastaman vibration. I guess that makes me Rita to his Bob. And I'm so glad to sing with him, to give thanks and praises to a God I wouldn't refer to otherwise. He makes me name each whaler, fills me with stories of Bunny and Peter Tosh. Bunny could sing while Peter talked his way through a song. Marvels with me at how much Ziggy looks like his dad, even if the younger Marley isn't nearly as astonishing musically. I think Bob would smile if he knew us, laughing at my husband, even though he's a crazy baldhead. A white man, like the white captain who married Marley's 18-year-old mother, only sent money after their son was born. When my husband croons, "No woman no cry," he changes the words, sings the name of our town instead of Trench Town, and I begin to think I could live anywhere with him. Any place we can open windows, drapes, let in a pale imitation of the sun Marley knew. Nowhere we can go where Marley can't follow. singing sweet songs, melodies clear and true. This is Marley's message to us, and we are grateful this messenger once walked the earth, telling us every little thing is gonna be alright. And we listen, dance to his voice in the light of our lives. Thank you. I would be happy. No, if you need to leave, do leave. I'm not going to keep you here. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about anything in particular. But if you don't have them, you don't have to ask them.
I just had a simple question. The Imitation of Life, is there a connection to that film?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well,
I always loved that.
I don't know if you're a fan of 50s melodrama, but I am. And the film Imitation of Life is one of those films where one of the central events is a black woman passing as white. And it's very schmaltzy, and it's got Lana Turner, and she's got big breasts and blonde hair. So it's a fascinating piece of Americana, so that it is about that movie and my delight and dismay over loving it. Other questions? You don't have to ask it, but just wanted to. Yes?
How long did you have to stay with your husband's parents?
I think it was an entire summer, if I remember correctly. She's like, how did you survive? They're very sweet people, really. I love them, but
Still.
I mean, you're confined to one room, and there are animals on the wall. It's a very difficult thing. Any other questions? Let's see. I have a question for you folks. Someone's appearing at Cranert Hall at 9 p.m. Her name is Julia Brown. Can anyone tell me who that is? Who? Oh, it's a student. Okay. I was hoping that it was Julia Brown, who was a wonderful singer-songwriter from New York. She is great, so pick up her CD. Not to diss Julia Brown here, but I thought we might have been having a concert, and I was really excited about possibly seeing Julia Brown. But if you're interested in Julia Brown, go to cdbaby.com, and you can check out her CD on cdbaby.com. cdbaby.com is a great site if you are sick of what's on the radio and what's on MTV, and you want to check out some people who have put out some independent releases. Wonderful. Okay, commercial over. Commercial break done. Yes?
Yeah, I thought you said you didn't have one of the black radio stations where you're from. I thought while you were in town you could listen to V103.
Oh, yeah. I got it. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Allison, how would you characterize your evolution as a poet thus far?
Evolution of a poet thus far, meaning me. I don't know if I've consciously thought about it. I think the only thing I've done is to continue to write things that interest me and hopefully interest other people. Every poet, I think, is challenged by the notion of who your audience is and what your audience might want to hear. But if I think about that too much, I won't write. And the things that preoccupy me, I've decided will always preoccupy me, so adolescence and race are always going to appear in my work. I will probably write about other things, but those are eternal subjects with me. I'm not going to write about something that I feel that I can't properly give it due. A lot of people ask me after September 11th, have you written a September 11th poem, as if it were a requirement to remain in the Poets Club. And I I felt that event deeply because I am originally from New York, but I couldn't articulate anything of any use to anybody else. All I could do was stare at CNN for days and days and days. But my eyeballs glazed over, and I finally read a book again. And when I did read a book again, I read poems by Robert Hayden, who is a very wonderful African-American poet who a lot of people haven't heard of. Just a fabulous, fabulous poet. And his major preoccupations were race and peace. So I figure if those were enough to hold him through a career, the things that occupy my mind will be sufficient. Hello.
Is there a particular poet that really inspired you to do what you do today?
There are a lot of poets who have inspired me over the years. One of them was Gwendolyn Brooks. I have to say that. I always say that. And she passed away just a few years ago. Maybe it isn't even a few years ago yet. At 83. That's a full, long life of writing and poems and talking to people about poetry, and it's kind of my role model for what I want. One of the reasons she inspired me is that coming across her poems, I realized that you could write about your own neighborhood, that you could write about the people that you knew, that you didn't have to invent anything. You could invent things about the people that you knew, but the people that you knew were a good enough subject. Yeah, you could lie about the people that you knew, but that you didn't have to write about historical events or things like that. Another real important poet to me was my graduate advisor, Yusef Komunyakaa, who you've probably read or maybe had the pleasure of hearing. Yusef was really important because of what he didn't say. He would look at my work in conference and he'd simply like point to a word. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's gone. He'd ask me questions like, Allison, do you have too many thes here? Really simple yet profound questions about my work. And I'd say, it's gone. That the is out of here. And I also am married to a poet, which is a big influence on me. That someone who's equally as preoccupied with language and making sounds and writing poems. It's an unequal relationship, though, because when I take him a poem I'm working on and show him a draft, he'll be like, okay, you need to get rid of this, 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 and this. I'll be like, you don't love me anymore. I hate you. We're going to divorce. And he'll bring me a poem that he's been working on, and I'll be like, Hercules, Hercules, Hercules! My baby did this! You see this? My baby did this! He's like, really? No. Can you help me here? Like right here? I'm like, no, it's just so good. I'm so proud of you. I exaggerate, but the dynamic really is very much like that, and we have opposite ways of writing. I write on anything that isn't nailed down. I have this superstition that if I go to Staples or Office Depot and buy the 12-pack of pads, that I will fill every pad. And there will be lots of poems, and I will be happy. And I write all over the place, and not on the walls. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but and he's the exact opposite. He carries a poem around in his head, and when he finally sits down, he doesn't handwrite. He rarely handwrites his poems, and I always handwrite mine. He sits down at the computer and just types out what's nearly a finished draft, and that's why I'm going, because it's nearly done, because he's done a lot of the work in his head, which amazes me. I can't carry around poetry. I can carry it like 2 or 3 lines, and then I have to go to the paper. So those are some of the people who have influenced me, and I'm constantly discovering new poets that I love because part of my work where I teach is to edit a literary magazine. So I'm constantly reading new poets, people I've never heard of, and I'm like, whoa, where's this person been? She's badass. That's one of my favorite words. So yes.
Do you see, what are the differences you see between academic poetry and popular poetry, if any?
Good question. Any differences between academic poetry and popular poetry? I'm not sure that those categories are so stiffly segmented apart from each other anymore. There are poets who are considered, if we're talking about popular poetry as slam or performance poetry, there are poets in that grouping that I've never actually seen perform, and I've only read them on the page, and they work for me splendidly on the page, like a poet like Patricia Smith, who has published several books. One of them is Close to Death. Writes a lot about the same things I do, has a lot of music in her work, and maybe that's why I find her work so fabulous. She's great, but so is Elizabeth Alexander, who would be considered an academic poet. She holds a post at Yale, publishes books with Grey Wolf Press, is very, very well regarded as both a poet and a scholar of African American literature. But I see commonalities between the work of Patricia Smith and Elizabeth Alexander. So I think those categories are collapsing, and I think one of the reasons those categories are collapsing is that more and more minority writers are becoming part of the canon. And minority writers, I was reading an interview with Kevin Young, who is a marvelous poet who used to be here in Georgia at UGA, and he was talking about, for the generation of African American poets in front of us, folk and jazz and blues. His new book is all about the blues. That was source material that they brought to the mainstream. And that for this generation, my generation and his generation of African American poetry, we're bringing popular culture references. So you find references to Shaft, not just in my work, but in Terrence Hayes. And you find references to all sorts of things. He wrote a whole book about the African American graffiti artist Basquiat. So I think that's part of breaking down those divisions between what's considered academic poetry and performance poetry. But there are all sorts of schools of poetry and schools of thought about poetry. You have the new formalists over here saying, rhyme and meter, rhyme and meter. You have the feminists over here bearing the Audre Lorde and Audrey Rich into the next century. So you have all sorts of things, but what I like is that when they all come together and people can actually have a conversation about saying, oh, that is bad, that is bad. They actually listen to one another for a change. Okay, I will step off the soapbox now. Any other questions? Thanks for coming. Thanks for being a wonderful audience.